I wanted to talk a little bit about Sarah Palin's interview with Katie Couric, and more specifically the portion of that interview where she failed to name a Supreme Court ruling other than Roe v. Wade that she disagreed with. Now, Joe Biden was able to name a court case that he was intimately familiar with because he helped to get past the Violence Against Women Act, and the Supreme Court overturned part of that act, and so he disagrees with that. His experience has allowed him to have that knowledge. But you don't necessarily need legislative experience to know about the Supreme Court rulings of the past. I'm a regular Joe Sixpack, and I know several Supreme Court rulings because I like to be politically involved. I like to be educated about the issues that face our nation and the history behind some of these Supreme Court decisions that affect us today. One case that I personally know about, because I have blogged about it, is the Supreme Court case with Ledbetter versus Goodyear Tire. This is a case where a female who was a manager for Goodyear Tire, she was the only female manager, and she was significantly paid less than her male counterparts. She determined that she was being discriminated against. She filed a lawsuit. She won a verdict in her favor, and that verdict was overturned, and the Supreme Court upheld the overturning of her award. And the reason that they give was because she filed the lawsuit beyond the 180-day time period that you have to file a discrimination lawsuit. The problem with this is that the Supreme Court considered the first act of payment, the decision to pay her lower wage than her male counterparts, as the beginning of where the clock started ticking, as opposed to what they should have done, which was considered each act of paying her a new discrimination act where the clock could have restarted ticking. So I disagree with that case wholeheartedly. I think their ruling was foolish. I think their ruling sets back anybody who seeks to seek justice against payroll discrimination. But again, this is a case that I learned about during my blogging. I don't necessarily expect Sarah Palin to know about this case. However, there are two cases that specifically should come to mind to anybody who wants to be involved in national level politics. One of them is the Plessy versus Ferguson ruling, and the other one is the Dred Scott case. This is just incomprehensible that the person who wants to be next in line for the presidency, the person who, if she did become president, would have to be responsible for potentially naming Supreme Court justices to the bench, that she doesn't know Dred Scott and she doesn't know Plessy versus Ferguson. It's absurd, and that in and of itself proves that she is not qualified for this position. And the reason that is important to point out is because McCain picked her, which shows a supreme error in judgment on his part, which is again another reason why John McCain should not be elected our next president, and that we need to vote for Barack Obama to be the president of the United States. And yes, it's more like Joe Kager and less like Joe Sixpack. But who needs a six-pack when you have a keg?